Hey everyone, this is BrettFish Anderson and back with a bonus episode of Out of the Fishbowl. I am super excited about this one. I've been talking about it for a little while, but the joy, excitement of having my wife, Amanda van der Pfeiffer Anderson, in the show for the very first time, and we are hoping to have a number of conversations, but thought it would be good for the first one to be getting to know her a little bit in an episode that is called Meet Amanda. Amanda, it's so good to have you on the show, and we have just recently, well, a week or so ago, I guess, celebrated 6 months of being married. And so I thought as people get to know you a little bit, we could make this first conversation a little bit about that. How did a 40-something-year-old Afrikaans woman who was content in her singleness find herself married to a 51-year-old divorced dude? And so how did this all start for you? I mean, and I don't know if you want to talk a little bit, maybe we can get back to that in terms of talking about singleness, but how did this thing happen for you?
It's nice to be on the show at last. Well, I think I remember, we were speaking about this the other day, remember you being in church, so I think visiting Wellspring Community Church, and I knew who you were, I knew your name, and I remember messaging a friend of mine going, BrettFish Anderson is preaching at our church. And yeah, she knew through the justice thing that you do. I think I followed you on Facebook. But I've never met you. Yeah, and then kind of like remembering you that you were in those spaces, and then you joined our life group. And yeah, I remember being quite curious because I knew what Helene, my friend, has been talking about you or saying about you, and I was quite curious just about who you are, because I remember you would come to our life group, but then when it ends, you will run off. And then the first kind of interaction or the first opportunity I kind of grabbed onto was, I think, in February of last year, when you sent a message on our live group, WhatsApp group, and said, guys, I'm coming back from Joburg. I'm arriving just before live group. Can somebody pick me up? And then I picked you up in more ways than others.
Wow. So I think before we carry on with that for me, there was that time of being at this new church. So I went and did some Heartline stuff there. It was a time when I was looking for a new church, and I just enjoyed the people, so I stayed. And then joined a life group, which I'd been avoiding for 30 years, kind of getting involved in a weekly kind of meeting gathering, but really enjoyed the people in that life group, and so I continued to go. And I remember at the time I'd been divorced. I'd been going through kind of 3 of the hardest years of my life. I really wasn't looking for a relationship. But I know that I'd also lost a couple of really good friends, and I was in a space where I've got great community, and I was realizing that a lot of my strong community was in other places. So I've got really good friends in Durban and Joburg and other places, and that my Cape Town community was feeling a bit thin. So there were a couple of people I'd looked at in the church, you and 1 or 2 other people that I was thinking, sure, it would be interesting to get to know them. So that was the initial sense for me. It wasn't like me looking at you saying, yo, she's the one, let's do it. And so, yeah, that opportunity of you saying you'll pick me up. I remember we had good conversation on the way to life group. You had some thoughts about that conversation?
Yeah, and I think it was the same for me. Was I like people, I like friendships and relationships. I'm curious in my nature about all things and people. So I thought, this is a time where we can just connect and I can hear a bit more about you. But then I feel it ended up you asking me a bunch of questions and me speaking about myself. And I remember like dropping you off and thinking, I didn't really learn more about you. But yeah, that was a good start, because I think, I don't know, I think then we had each other on WhatsApp and we had some, not a lot, but like some conversation or banter on WhatsApp.
Yeah, and then I remember you had a birthday party at that time and you invited the whole of life group. So I went, and I don't know how I knew then. I know now, but somehow I must have known that red wine was your vibe, because I had a bottle of red wine and dropped it in my garage as I was about to leave my house. And I think I sent you the photo. kind of like a crime scene, just this this shards of glass and red wine all over my garage floor. But I remember coming to your party, and it was a thing at your folks' house. And I remember there was maybe a bit of an awkward. I arrived a little bit early and there weren't a lot of people and we didn't know each other, so that was a bit awkward. But for the rest of the evening, I didn't spend a lot of time. You were being a hostess and connecting with all the people, so I chatted to some of your friends and some of the life group people. And I don't know if that was the time I had a swim at your folks' house.
I think so. I think you hid.
I hid in the pool. Yeah, but it wasn't a case of I don't think there was a time when either of us spent a lot of time chatting to each other. So it was almost kind of like a non-thing. And I think for me it was that sense of curiosity, which is something you've really brought to my life in so many ways, in terms of naming it and exploring situations with it, but just that sense of, oh, who is this person? And then kept on being somebody that would kind of pop up in my mind or stuff like that. In terms of like how it went from there to here for you?
Yeah, I think after that we had some conversations on WhatsApp, and I remember like some like friendly like I think banter is the right word. There was a worship evening just after, like a week after my birthday. I think like by then I was again like so curious and thought, like we should go. I just actually wanted to like just have some one-on-one time just to get to know you. And then thought, I must invite you out for a drink or something. And then didn't.
Why not?
I don't know. I just felt a bit awkward.
I feel like when you've told that story in every other setting, you've used the term chickened out. Is that?
Yeah. I wanted to, and then chickened out. And then like I feel like then we had like some conversation, and then that I think that was a Wednesday, and then that Friday, maybe it was a week later, I can't remember, but you messaged me. You were at a conference and there was some, can I say, very dodgy theology being proclaimed, and you sent me like one or two pics of slides, and and like I responded to that. I was busy in like sessions in Stellenbosch, so I would like between sessions pick up my phone and there would be more messages. And what I like after my chickening out, I remember thinking, okay, if I have the opportunity again, I'm just gonna ask you like to have a drink, and because it's okay. And I feel I remember on my birthday you messaged me, you said so you said happy birthday on the live group, but you also individually messaged me or direct messaged me and said something like, oh, like I would have asked you out for a glass of wine or something, but I have a book launch. And then I was like, oh, why is this guy, like, why does he want to go out? What's this? And then I was in Stellenbosch and I had drinks or dinner with some friends. And I remember thinking, oh, I have to say no because I'm in Stellenbosch, but I don't want to say no. So I said something like, oh, like I would have loved that, but I'm in Stellenbosch. The kind of saying yes without being able to say yes. So because of that, I felt it's okay to ask, because there's all of these like cultural like role things about like a girl shouldn't ask the guy, like all of those things. So I felt that I had permission. So then when you said those things on that Friday from the conference, at some point you were like, oh, like this is just horrible. And then I said, oh, if you want to debrief over a whiskey, let me know. And that was kind of my moment of, okay, let me ask you.
Put yourself out there.
Yes. And then that went down quite interestingly.
So I think the exact term was like, do you want to detox over whiskey, which felt really appropriate given all the toxins I was taking in that conference. What's interesting about memory, we remember things sometimes differently to how they are. And every time I remember that day, like when I went to check my phone initially, once things started happening with us, like I sent those screenshots to my friend Mike in the UK, and I sent them to you. And I don't remember having feelings for you at the time. But when I look back, there was something significant that you were the second person that I chose because we hadn't really related a lot since then. So it feels like there was some inherent me making a move or flirting or leaning out or whatever. Like, why you? It feels like it was important that it was you, or significant to me that it was you, even though definitely when I look back at the time, I wasn't thinking like, oh, let me make a move or anything like that. Yeah. And then the way I tell that story, I think we have slightly different ways of telling the story, was I knew that you liked, or you'd mentioned whiskey in the tweet or in the WhatsApp, and during life group that week or in previous times, we discovered that we had a mutual enjoyment of British comedy. And I've got a projector and a wall at home, so I said to you, well, why don't you bring your whiskey and we can watch British comedy at my house? And subsequently, when you've told the story, you always say that when you were asking me for whiskey, you thought in a restaurant like a normal person.
Yeah. So my idea was like, let's go have a drink somewhere, a drink, and then so when you said, "Oh, like bring a whiskey," I was like, okay, and I didn't feel weird, and I think the same. Like there was some curiosity again, maybe from both sides. So then, what you didn't know that, what you
Well, let's can we get back to that? Let me just explain the evening, and then you can come with the punchline, because I love the story. Like I love that this is our connecting story. So Amanda says, sure, I'll bring my whiskey, and she was working in Stellenbosch, so she was going to get home a little bit later than me, and so at 7:30 she arrives with some whiskey, and we watch British comedy, and I kind of had a range of different things that I showed her, and I think she'll probably say that it kind of got riskier and edgier, like kind of a test to see, is this gonna be okay? Is this gonna be too much? Yeah. And just really seem to connect with everything. Like we just seem to have a very similar sense of humor, and we'll get into the unicornness of that a little later. But then and you stayed till about 11 o'clock midnight, somewhere around there. And then as you were leaving, I remember what was significant to me, and what you describe as being absolutely free of significance, is that you asked if I want a nightcap, and you left a nightcap of whiskey with me as you were about to head out and drive. And then a week or two later, you revealed the truth of that encounter from your side. So what was that?
Yeah, so when I said, or when you said, like, bring your whiskey and come over and watch some British comedy, and I said yes. I was in Stellenbosch, and I actually still had a coffee date with a friend after work. But then also I knew I didn't have any whiskey at home, so I drove out of Stellenbosch around 6, stopped somewhere, bought some whiskey, but then stopped at my flat because I didn't want you to know that I that I bought whiskey, especially. So I stopped at my flat and I decanted some of the whiskey into like a different like little bottle, so that I could bring like an open bottle of whiskey to your house. And then also like I thought, oh, maybe you would want like a last whiskey when I left, because I was not going to leave my newly bought whiskey with you, because I think I bought some nice whiskey also, and well, semi nice, not weekday whiskey. Yeah, and then
Some first date whiskey.
Yeah, maybe some let's impress him a bit. Whiskey. So I bought the whiskey, the candidate, went over to your place with that whiskey.
I think there's two things I really love about that story. The first is the story that you went, got whiskey, decanted it, came to my house. The second is kind of the intrinsic difference between most men and women, that you suspected for a second that I would have noticed you pitching up with a full bottle of whiskey, which just never would have happened. But I love that you took that into consideration. But just a fun evening, and I know like there was banter in between. We chatted, we watched a bunch of different things. You seem to really connect with the stuff.
Yeah, we stopped watching at some point, and then we just chatted for a bit, and then I went home just because I woke up at 5 in the morning. I think that's the only reason why we stopped it at like 11:30 or something.
Yeah, and then kind of progression from there.
Yeah, I think then. Oh, well, I think we never stopped chatting like over WhatsApp since like from there onwards. I mean, to find something on our WhatsApp is, even if you have the day and the date, it's like really hard because there's so many messages. But I think then we like that next week we decided to redo that, to watch some, and I think
all the ones I've left out.
You had a list of things that you still wanted to show me. We did that after live group, and like also after, I mean, that's too long, sorry to like, we'll spend another 10-15 minutes just on that. But yeah, I waited for live group. It was at my place. Everybody left. You had a line about washing dishes or something, so you could stay behind. We thought they didn't notice, but they did.
It was the line. I did wash the dishes.
Yeah, you did wash the dishes, and you still do. But then, we ended up, I think that went on to like 1:30. And again, it was like watching stuff, but it was also like connecting and chatting. And so it was just the sense of continued like conversation and interest and just checking in on each other. I remember can't remember when that was in the timeline, but soon after, I think the week after, it was I had like a bunch of interviews in Stellenbosch, and you were like literally checking in, like saying, "Oh, like you should be halfway now," or things go, like things like that. That's when like I was sleeping over in Stellenbosch, and so I was sleeping over at Stefani's place. Helene wasn't not there, and I remember the second I was like, "Oh, like they're checking in, he's keep on chatting to me," and then she said, "You like this," and then I knew. Yes, I did. And I think that later that week we kind of like said the things and just called it what it was.
Yeah, so you mentioned, and I think there's a lot, I was just about to say, there's a lot more of that of you. I think the night that you came the first time to watch the movies, that coffee date you had with your friend, you were like, oh, what's going on here? And maybe some of the significance of that is that you have never dated someone before, and you married the first person you dated. I mean, that's a pretty good record. Maybe, do you want to speak into that at all? Because you were 42, 43, 42, 42, single person. I mean, somebody listening probably thinks, oh, that's terrible. Like, you must have had such a sad, lonely life and just needing the man to come in and swoop in and save you from all the things. But what I've known from the very beginning, what I've witnessed in you before we got together, and especially since then, is that that's not the case at all. And would you like to speak into that?
Yeah, I always say I was single since the age of 12 because that's when I remember the first kind of couple emerged, like in standard 4, grade 6. Yeah, and it just never happened. And like, like in the different years, there were, I think, different reasons, and like that's a different story. But I can honestly look back and say that for most of that, so for most of the then 30 years that I was single. And when I say I was single, I mean it wasn't I didn't have like relationships. Like there was not really anything. There were crushes and things like that, but there was never like a fling here or there. Like it was really like single life. But I will look back and say that like most of that, like the majority of that time, like it wasn't hard for me to be single. It wasn't some of it came with like, oh, yeah, when you like somebody, and that wasn't. I always struggle with this English word, reciprocated. Like that would be hard. But the singleness, like being by myself, wasn't most of the time was not hard. Maybe not even ever. And I think a part of that is because I had and still have a group of friends, and like group of girlfriends and guys that were some of them also single, some of them not single, but really people who have been those witnesses. So I remember there was a movie, I think it was Susan Sarandon. I can't remember who the guy is, maybe Richard Gere, where she talks about the importance of marriage, or the significance maybe of marriage, and that that person is your witness, that they witness your life. And I just really, in all of my essence, do not agree that you have to be married to have that, to have witnesses, to have intimacy, to have companionship. And that takes intentionality. So the friendships that I've had and have are ones where we have witnessed all the ups and downs, but and we've been each other's go-to. We've had the fun together. We traveled together. So all of that can happen outside of partnership or marriage, or outside of romantic relationship. And also then the true essence of intimacy can also happen outside of romantic relationships. But it does take intentionality. So in the same way, where in long-term romantic relationships like marriage, where you have to choose to stay, even when it gets hard or when you don't feel like it, or you have to compromise a bit. Like if you also do that, you should also do that in friendships.
Yeah.
And I think like in the group of friends that I have where I've experienced that is why like those in that friendships in that your circle of friends that are also single or still single. I don't like the word still single, but who are single.
Yeah.
Like we've all like made sacrifices and compromised and be there even sometimes when we didn't want to. So worked hard but people think you only work hard at marriage relationships or romantic relationships, and that you have to have that. And I really don't believe. I believe this is a bonus, not something I had to have.
Yeah, I really love that you talk about like those important things, and it's just finding them in other spaces. That there's this assumption that, oh, for love you need marriage, or for companionship you need marriage. You spoke about witness, and just like I remember, so we've done a series in church recently called Spiritual Family, and the one week was quite a strong focus on singleness, because the church, as with other spaces, we tend to glorify marriage and see marriage as the way to go. And once you get married, within 5 minutes, people are asking about children. And once you've had your first child, within 5 minutes, like people are always focused on that next stage, and kind of like that's when you've arrived, and you have to. So I've been married before, so I can't speak about the marriage one, but definitely the children one. That you don't feel complete because other people make you not feel complete, because that's what you need to complete the circle. These are the things that are needed. And what I really loved, and I think it was Joel that expressed it during the series, but it's definitely something you've spoken about before, is that people will ask questions: when are you getting married, or do you feel this, or aren't you missing out this? And I think Joel said, like, people never ask, like, do I have joy? Am I loved? And that's what you're talking about now with this witness. Like, actually, I have all those things. I just don't have them in the place where you expect it, and where you see it as, oh, that's the way. And it's like, no. I think it was Diane Keaton. We just saw on the news today that she just died, and I was reading up an article on her that said she's been single her whole life, and she had an account with a young guy, maybe when she was at school, who said, oh, I'm going to marry you one day, or something like that, and she said no, she didn't feel this need to be married, and then at some point she felt a motherly need, and she adopted 2 children, but just that sense that it's not the way, and society has made it really hard for single people, because there's the sense of less than, you haven't arrived, you haven't got the thing. And I know a lot of single people need it and feel it. I know when I was single, I wanted to be in a relationship a lot of the time. So it's a very different story, but it's not one story. And I think you've given us a beautiful picture of how that can look differently. And I've witnessed it, even now that you're married, I've witnessed it in your group of friends, of how you show up for each other. I mean, we saw it at the wedding, but we see it in different aspects of their life, both your girl and your guy friends. When somebody's parent is in hospital, or when somebody is struggling with a job or whatever, just how people show up. And it's like, that is beautiful. It's beautiful when that happens in marriage, but it's also beautiful when it just happens in community.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you mentioned now the thing of like, you know, people don't ask you about, do you have love? Or I think it was, I listened to a podcast of Simon Sinek, and he speaks about that, where he's never been married, and then he says, like, people ask him, like, are you married, or why aren't you married, or why haven't you been married? But nobody asks him, do you have good, healthy relationships?
Yeah.
And it's that, like, nobody has asked me that ever in my life. Because the answer on that is yes. And I think I've had relationships that were in some parts and sometimes stronger than some people's marriage relationships.
Yeah.
So I think that is so important, because again, going back to, like, it doesn't have to be marriage. But then also, now I forgot the other thing I wanted to say.
Well, let's. I mean, we'll come back to it, but I know something that you do want to say on this, that you speak about often, is, and I don't know if it's the reason. I know the reason why you're wanting to keep your name. You're not becoming Amanda Anderson. It's Van der Faith Anderson. So there's part of it that you are accepting my name into your life, but part of it is that you want to stay connected to your family. But I think the other part of that, and I think something we saw in our vows, something we saw in the marriage ceremony, is this idea that we are not 2 half people that are becoming one person. I think that is such a key thing to speak into. I think it speaks to the singleness thing, that if you stay single and you've got the love and you've got the support and you've got those other things, you're not a half person. But that idea that we are two full people that are choosing to be in union with each other, and we're choosing to celebrate and cheerlead and walk alongside each other. I didn't become my full self because I married you, and I know you feel very strongly that you didn't become your full self because you stepped into this marriage with me.
Yeah, I think it's just like it's bonus, and I do think there's things about like we can do things, we can join our two whole parts and do exciting things. But yeah, it's not too hard. So that's really hard for me. Like, people going, oh, like now you have your other half. I remember somebody saying, oh, like, oh, I'm so happy. I knew you would find love. And it's like, I've always had love. Like, don't say that. Like, that just speaks into this thing. And the one thing I forgot earlier that I wanted to say is that thing of people like I said, like I think majority of my single life, it wasn't hard to be single. It was hard to talk about it. And I remember like having like being a weekend away and some like evening like next to the fire, the conversations are going about, oh, like how long have you been single, or when was your last relationship? And then like having anxiety, or like really actually like maybe even exiting the conversation. Or when people say, oh, are you married yet? It's like, it's fine if you ask me whether I'm married, although like it's strange that is the only interesting question that people have about people that they meet the first time. But that's fine. Like, ask me whether I'm married. But asking somebody, are you married yet? Like implies that somebody wants to be married, or like that you should be married. And we must check our and that was so there's always like shame in then saying like, no, like I'm not married, and then the very awkward silence of people not knowing what to say then. And then you kind of, when you start talking about how you're fine being single, like there's this feeling of like people really don't believe you. But yeah, things were like different. I mean, we spoke now about like I was very content. We had conversations about you disrupting my singleness, you disrupting my content single life. And I mean in good ways. But it was different for you. I mean, you alluded to some of that earlier. But yeah, like it was a different path for you, especially the 3 years prior or leading to us meeting up and having some whiskey.
So I mean, I was married for 12 years, and then Valerie ended the marriage, and that felt very kind of spectator-y in the moment, like it was something that happened to me that I didn't have a lot of control over, and then suddenly I was divorced, and divorce was not a word in my lexicon. I like looking back. Actually, recently I realized that there were a few people here and there that were divorced, like even my grandfather was, but I never actually, as a kid, like I understood that he was with Auntie Liz and that my gran was separate, but I never connected the dots. And it's interesting what kids don't realize sometimes when they're growing up, if it's not named. And so there was divorce, but not a lot of it. And especially as a 20, 30-year-old, like I think given the rates of divorce in the country, I didn't have a lot of it around me. But it was just, I made a commitment, and that commitment was for life. And then suddenly the other person was, no, we're done. And so that was really hard for me, even though it was challenging. Like the marriage was challenging from the beginning for both of us. Like we said, that it was difficult a lot of the time. There were really good times, there were really hard times. But I think when that ended, I really went into 3 of the hardest years of my life, and I've spoken a bit about that in the episode When Your Ship Hits the Fan, and I spoke on the other side of that in the episode This Too Shall Pass, like being able to look back, and that was a mantra that I held on to. But there was a sense of like I have felt that sense of I've got so much love to give, and that sense of I desire to be in relationship with someone because of that, and not ever seeing that necessarily as someone else's story. That felt particularly my story, and so I hope I haven't been someone that puts that on other people. But really just in that confused place, because remarriage also was not something that fit theologically or and I spend a lot of time like kind of trying to understand that, and is this okay, and does it fit in with my Christianity and all that kind of thing. And so definitely wasn't looking forward or expecting it, and so it was very pleasant that it felt like it happened so naturally. It felt so easy. I remember in our time of getting to know each other and dating and leading up to marriage, all the conversations we had that should have been difficult conversations every time were just so completely easy. Whether it was talking about Valerie or whether it was talking about physical stuff, or like we had a whole bunch of conversations, money, things like that. Like this is going to be a hard conversation. Then after it, going like, oh, like it really wasn't. And I think that's something that speaks to our connection. And I don't think we have necessarily the perfect marriage, and I don't think we don't irritate each other. But one of the things that has stood out for me in what is it, a year and 6 months that we've kind of been connected is this sense of definitely not walking on eggshells, which was a problem that I had in the past, and a sense of somebody who loves me and isn't afraid to tell me, someone who cheerleads me, which has felt unusual in terms of everything, in terms of oh, you should preach more, or oh, this poetry book that's coming out, like I want to throw you a poetry book launch, and things that seem weird but should feel normal. And so for me, a lot of it has been adjusting to this is normal, this is right, this is okay, and it's beautiful, especially in some of the areas where it was stuff that I didn't necessarily experience or have before. So that's been a really amazing part of the journey for me.
John, even I mean, you're saying irritation, and one of those things is also part of that relationship. And and sometimes we like elevate something like romantic relationships or love or something that is like where that's absent. Um, that doesn't really make sense.
So as we wind down, I think the thing that I'm most excited about, the thing I'm hoping for, is that we're going to do a bunch of these conversations and speak into actual kind of topics and themes. This was a little bit of our story and letting people get to know you, but I think there's already been some valuable stuff for people listening, whether married or single. I think before we close, I want to share a little bit about the unicorn, and then maybe if you have any final thoughts, you can end us off. But I remember early on, I've got one of my ex-youth friends. Ex-youth, he's still my friend. Julian Taylor, he was actually at my house this week playing board games. But I remember speaking to him about Amanda, and it was this idea of this Afrikaans person who likes British comedy, and he was like, "Oh, a unicorn." And Amanda got very offended when I when I told her that, or slightly offended when I told her that, because of some assumptions about Afrikaans people, I guess. But that stuck quite early on and became her spirit animal, and so now she probably has about 100 things. I don't know if it's like pillowcases and wine glasses and pens and dolls and all these kind of things. I made some of those up. She's pulling faces at me, but you have a lot more unicorns in your life than before we met.
Yes, but please, no pillowcases.
Oh, sorry, I gave away a Christmas present.
Or wine glasses.
But that's just become a fun thing, and I think yeah. As I end off, and I don't know if you do have a final word, but it'll be cool if you want to. Like one of the things that stands out about our relationship is just how much fun we have together. There's a voice note from early on when I voice noted you as my alter ego, BrettFish Anderson, and that's the time when I remember you laughing the most at me. I think since then you laugh at your own jokes more than you laugh at mine. But sharing comedy has been a theme. Like it was right there at the beginning, and now through some series that you didn't particularly like, and then I introduced you to them, and then watching them with me, like they've become our own. Parks and Rec, Brooklyn, things like that. But we can laugh about the silliest things. We can find laughter in serious things sometimes, and maybe sometimes it's the only things that keep us sane. I think of maybe some of our present circumstances and things that are happening in the background. That laughter has been so precious. In addition to that, because I'm sure you agree with me in that, but if you look back at this journey as we close off here, like what is something that you feel is like a staple, or is something that has been significant that I don't know if it's necessarily that you didn't have before, but something that you found to be true being in relationship with me?
Yeah, I think maybe something that was a surprise. And we spoke about this quite, and that's why the disruption of singleness. So I really like my space, and I really enjoyed having my own space. I was living by myself for like a whole number of years. I remember Helene, who's a very close friend, she was a housemate at some point. I'm still one of the core people in my life, and also the one that knows both of us. When I told her that, sure, like when we were visiting, and then like there's an evening where this was like in the start, right? And maybe you're not going to be there because you have rugby, but then I'm like, oh, but come over, And then she said, like, that was for her, that was like the telltale, like the fact that I want you in my space. And I think that was a surprise for me. And that was probably one of the signs for me that even though I really like my own space, I like you in my space. And I often say to you, and I still say this to you, I mean, because I work with people, so my extrovert is thin already, but some days my extrovert runs out. And then I will say like, oh, I just can't do, I'm peopled out. You said the same thing, I'm peopled out. And in the beginning, it was a joke of like, oh, okay, I won't come over. I was like, no, but you're not people. And I think that has been the surprise and the staple for me is that, and we had this conversation, I mean, earlier this weekend, that we, sometimes, like it's whether it's connecting in a way that we have important conversations or check in, or whether it's watching something. Like the watching something never feels like, oh, we are hiding or running away from connecting with each other. Sometimes it's just that's how we connect and we're next to each other. And I can sense that there's always this thing of if we didn't actually check in, if we had busy 2 days, like we pause the show much more to actually, like I still need to tell you this story or continuation of the story. And I think that is so again, so and maybe it sounds contradictory because like I really felt that I was content and that I had the people, but this is such a bonus of having another close witness, and that's really special, and that and having you in my space is a good thing.
Thank you. And thanks for this conversation. I think the idea of telling somebody you're not people sounds like the strongest insult possible, and yet it comes across as the most loving thing in the context that you've described. And I know for me it was like the first time I heard it, oh wow, like okay, that's cool. So you've got to kind of experience a little bit of the glimpse of why I love this woman so much, why the journey's been so amazing. The reason I really want her on Out of the Fishbowl is because she has so much wisdom, so much curiosity, and so many perspectives of being able to see things from different directions. And I'm looking forward to getting into a bunch of topics and hearing both of our takes on things, our back and forth, and hopefully having extra voice in the space, and especially her voice is going to take us to places we haven't got to when Out of the Fishbowl has just been me. So very excited about the next season and hearing a bit more from Amanda van der Veef Anderson. Thank you for spending this time with me.
Thank you.